Howdy, folks. Thanks for joining us on this, the inaugural episode of Breaking Housing Matters. I am your host, Scott Graves, local resident here in the great city of Rutland, Vermont, USA. And today I have the great pleasure of sitting down with the founder of Breaking Housing Matters. It is not just this television show, but it is in fact a national housing initiative which we intend to pilot here, first in the nation, in the great city of Rutland, Vermont. I'm, of course, talking about founder Peter DeCrossel.
Pleasure being here, Scott, and thanks for having me.
I'm really glad that we're having the opportunity here to sit down for this, the inaugural spot for Breaking Housing Matters, the television show.
It is indeed a pleasure being here on this hot day that is sweeping the country. Yeah. And one of the major things that people need when the weather is like this is roofs over their head, shelter.
Right.
And that's what Breaking Housing Matters is all about, as you well know.
Right. Not just any old housing, but good housing and resilient housing.
The key, as you know, is about building affordable housing that is profitable. Housing that is affordable to buyers, renters, and of course the homeless, and at the same time is profitable to developers and landlords. And as you know, what is profitable for a landlord or developer in Rutland is not necessarily the same formula for a landlord developer in another major city like Boston.
Yeah, when I was first alerted to the initiative, and then we decided to engage, one of the things that struck me after considering it for a while is, as an economic initiative, this bottom-up approach can really reallocate a significant portion of household income back into the consumer. Two primary places that stick out in my mind. One is the consumer marketplace,
correct,
right?
Correct.
Instead of it going into your housing, any of the other basic needs that people have. The other thing is just simply putting a lot of household income back into your savings.
Correct.
We have a lot of people in this country, a lot of people represented by virtually every strata of socioeconomics, not just the poor, that would be saving more and would have a more resilient future for their retirement if they could put more back into their savings. And so those two places really stuck out to me. What else do we want to let people know that is unique about this initiative?
No, but I think I'd like to, kind of spell out why there's more income that goes into the community, because it's important that people know that a lot of people with two household incomes even can't afford to live, rent, or buy a home, and wind up living in their cars, living at 24-hour restaurants, paying up to 80% of the joint incomes for housing. The key point is nobody, whether buyer or renter, should have to pay more than 25% of their income for housing. And the more important factor is that when there's a change in government, it is apolitical. It does not change by administration to administration. And the third important factor is that all government programs to date are run by government agencies, as you well know. And this is the first proposal that is requiring that it be a partnership between the public and private sector, and that it be run by a banker or real estate executive. The government representatives and stakeholders can, of course, be on the board of management, but it is a local initiative run city by city, because the fundamental requirement to make Breaking Housing Matters and its housing subsidy solution and housing subsidy fund functional is that a local city has to get involved at the city level with the ordinance, which is why we're delighted that the city of Rutland is interested in piloting the project. But then how do you make up the difference of the other 75%? And this is what makes this initiative different. The city that already gets funds from the state and federal government with this program can require more funding from the federal government. If the federal government can spend over $300 billion on farmers not to grow, what about spending a few billion in the city of Rutland or Vermont to seed housing? So we start at the local level with an ordinance. That is an ordinance we have already drafted here in the city of Rutland, have submitted it to the city attorney to review and submit to the alderman. And we are waiting for a meeting with the city council. However, in addition to that, in order to get the support locally, we are also going to be starting with a petition to get registered voters in the city to sign a petition so that the city alderman can see that there is broad-based public support.
Yeah.
So the city and state are one of the 5 stakeholders, as you know.
Yeah.
The other 4 stakeholders include bankers, because after all, bankers and financial institutions make most of their money on construction loans, mortgage loans, and infrastructure bonds. So we're saying, why not contribute a few basis points to the housing subsidy fund? In addition, all lenders have charitable institutions that they give to a lot of good causes.
Yeah. Much of that can be reallocated back into housing, which is a direct benefit to the work that they're doing selling mortgages. Yeah.
You got it.
Same goes for your developers, your landlords.
Exactly,
right?
and they're the third stakeholder.
And they're the third stakeholder. And I want to go on with the individual stakeholders in just a moment, but just there's a lot to unpack.
Oh, I know. Keep going.
Another strength of the program, it seems to me, is this idea that all of the stakeholders, all of the main groups of people that have something to do with housing, right? Let's call that the housing ecosystem, need to participate in this endeavor,
Correct.
right? That is one of the things that distinguishes Breaking Housing Matters from any other type of housing program that targets currently in the marketplace. Most of those, as you mentioned, are government-based. We don't have anything against the government, but we say they're just one of many stakeholders that have something to do that influence the marketplace for housing. And so we want to bring all of those people together, bring together funding that comes from a variety of all of them. And at the same time, that subsidy is used. It's paid directly to the developers or the landlords themselves to subsidize, to externalize the cost, rather, of people's housing needs. At the same time that your landlords, that your mortgagees don't take a haircut, right?
Correct.
Which we should point out, one of the problems with something that all of us understand already, it's been around for a very long period of time, is rent control, right? Why, Peter, does rent control not work?
What happens is landlords and developers then wind up taking rental units off the market.
Right.
They wind up converting them to condominiums. They become homes for sale. So actually you wind up having fewer units for rent.
I mean, in short, in plain English for our viewers, one group has to take a haircut.
Right.
At the expense, one group benefits at the expense of another, which is why it doesn't work for the whole ecosystem.
Well, that's what makes Breaking Housing Matters and the housing subsidy solution different. Nobody takes a haircut.
Right.
Because, for example, when the lending institution gives a few basis points to the housing subsidy fund, they get a tax break for it. For example, when it comes to landlords and developers or sellers of homes, many cities and states have adopted what they call millionaire's tax, where a home selling above a certain amount, a percentage of that goes into a homeless fund. Well, why limit it to millionaires? Why not make it all homes? So anybody who sells a home at a profit, based on what is reasonable in that city, pays a percentage of that profit to the housing subsidy fund, but they get a tax break in return. So that's what makes this program what it is. Nobody gets to have a haircut.
Right.
Basically, everybody wins. It's affordable housing built profitably. Because in addition to the cities, the lenders, and the landlords and developers that we talked about, 3 of the stakeholders, there are 2 other critical stakeholders. One being charitable institutions, philanthropies, foundations that to date really don't give much, if anything, to housing because they know all programs are run by the public sector, and the waiting list is just too long.
Right.
And foundations and charities want to see immediate results, something we offer them. The fifth stakeholder, which is the most important one, and interestingly enough, the one who received the most positive response, are religious houses of worship. They all have a tax-exempt status, one of the conditions being to provide housing for the needy.
Right. And if not a legal imposition, it certainly, you know, religiously in the Bible, we talk about, you know, you housed me when I was homeless. You
Correct.
fed me when I was hungry, etc.
Correct.
Are you referring to all houses of worship regarding other circumstance? Because when we talk about houses of worship in general, you know, there's a pretty broad spectrum of capability there from a nonprofit, from a donor standpoint, right?
Correct.
With congregations.
No, I am, and many. You can start from the very small parishes of single family pastors that are just struggling to get anything done. No, we if anything, we want to support them. Right. But the larger institutions, like the big established monotheistic religions, be they Christian, Jewish, or Muslim, up to 50%, and I emphasize up to, of the donations they receive should in fact go to the Housing Subsidy Fund to subsidize housing. That's why they have a tax-exempt status. So honor it. Many do, but most don't. And those that even do, don't do enough. So it's time that the religious organizations that get tax breaks start not only feeding people, but housing them and becoming part of the Breaking Housing Matters initiative.
Yeah, so a lot of what we're talking about for many of these constituencies is not so much to do something, not to do something that's too much different than what they're doing now, but a reallocation, right? A reprioritization.
Reprioritization, that's a good
which,
word.
because this is a different mechanism, a different type of independent organization, they can do so with a lot more confidence than they have been able to in the past. You know, one of the things that one of the concerns that people and questions I get a lot advocating for this program here in the city and in other locales is, well, you know, but if everybody's a part of it, right, it somehow doesn't feel like it's fair, right? That certain people are going to get a subsidy that, you know, quote unquote, don't deserve it, right? And I think I'm actually interested in your feedback on this. My take on that is, you know, that if everybody in the pool, right, is the pool of candidates is participating, then the pool of possible subsidy, the amount of money that we're able to raise in any one municipality is strengthened, right? It's enlarged. And the reality is, again, we're talking about this as an economic mechanism to reallocate household income back into other I won't say more worthwhile things, right? But more of a balance.
But into the local economy. It's just into the local economy.
It's a market mechanism.
Correct.
So you know, what's your take on that when people say, well, what about people that, you know, don't need a subsidy, or, you know, because first of all, how do you define that, right?
Well,
how do you know what's in the hearts and minds of any single household member, you know, that kind of thing?
Every government program across the nation have models as to what allows people to qualify.
Right.
The state of Vermont has them. So we can use any of the existing models, if you will.
So that's part of the bottom-up approach, is because locally we're saying we want this to be a national initiative, right? But it has to be adopted city to city, town to town, right? And it's part of what they could design into their local
Correct.
program.
And not only that, getting young families to start climbing up the housing ladder.
Right.
Why, for example, should reverse mortgages be limited to seniors? Mm-hmm. Why not have reverse mortgages that the Housing Subsidy Fund, with the lending institutions that are partners, provide reverse mortgages to young couples? Historically, it has been proven that most young couples, within 5 to 10 years, move up the housing ladder.
Yep.
A lot quicker than many seniors pass. So why not make that available, which is how we then get people that have an income able to afford a mortgage? Because today, people with very good incomes have a hard time getting a mortgage.
Well, that's right.
Unless they have a guarantor who the bank accepts.
Right.
And we're saying if you have a family or that has a decent income and the house is there as collateral with a reverse mortgage, it's a win-win for everybody.
And I'm hearing in what you're saying there, not a suggestion of using novel financial mechanisms from a bank or other
Right.
lender, right? But to take the existing ones, but to use them in a slightly different way.
Use them in a constructive, people-friendly manner that, on the one hand, provide shelter, housing for buyers and renters, and stops the current plague of what I call of housing insecurity. The nation has an epidemic.
Right.
And it's housing insecurity. People that even have a roof over their head are worried that they may become homeless.
Right.
So let's address that. Let's make sure they stay in the house they have. Let's make sure they can afford to buy a house if they want to buy one, or that if they're spending more than 25% of their income for the current shelter, that it be reduced to 25%. These are all models we could do at a city level.
Yeah.
With today's technology, it's doable. It's
Right.
easy.
Right.
And with AI coming in, it's going to be even easier to execute.
You have a unique global perspective in that you professionally spend time in various parts of the world. This is really a global problem, though, isn't it? This isn't just the
Absolutely.
United States.
Correct. It is a global crisis, and I believe that starting here in the city of Rutland, that has a very progressive thinking mayor and executive director at the Rutland Housing
Rutland Redevelopment
Authority, is a perfect place to start. And Rutland, having lost all the people it has over the last few years, all the industry that wants to come here, but the key people can't find housing, Rutland is perfectly situated to become the pilot, the model for the state of Vermont, because housing is a crisis in Vermont, but then it can be adopted as a model for the nation. And then the rest of the world can emulate it and copy it. I mean, as someone who spends a lot of time, as you say, abroad and in Hong Kong, I have written op-ed pieces that have been published. Countries like China and other countries with similar political regimes focus on other priorities right now. They have more than just housing crisis there, with the collapse of the housing market there and big developers going into bankruptcy. America's economy is the strongest in the world, notwithstanding what people say about inflation and notwithstanding the political rhetoric during a campaign year.
Yeah.
The reality is the economy in America is the strongest in the world.
Which, by the way, is scary to those of us who are struggling here in the
Right,
greatest
correct.
economy in the world.
And I understand the concerns and fears of inflation, but if you look at unemployment, it's gone down, which is why this model can work here, has to be launched in America, and then it becomes a global model that other countries will adopt. As I shared with you recently, I met with some government officials from Cameroon and Africa in New York. They love the idea. They want to take it. But I want to start in Rutland, go statewide, then national.
It's funny, you know, because another common question I get is, well, why Rutland? Why here? Why Vermont? All that kind of stuff. And my answer to that immediately is, why not? Why not this place? Why? Why can we not lead? Why can we not change the narrative, change the direction that our community is in, if that's what we so choose, right? Which is another great thing about this is how the initiative interacts with the democratic process in a locality.
Correct.
I think that the fact that you need to have this adopted by the citizens by vote, it's truly saying to people, look, we're not trying to impose something on you, whether it would be beneficial to you or not, but we want your feedback and we want you to support it. We want you to first understand it and we want you to support it so that you can see that it will benefit you. That's important.
For example, when I, as a former practicing lawyer who represented developers in California and who was the lawyer for the Western Mobile Home Association, who dealt with many mobile home parks and went to many tenant meetings with mobile home residents, I feel for the people in Vermont whose mobile homes have been wiped out by the recent floods.
Yeah.
As I pointed out in a recent article I submitted and had published in the local papers.
Mobile homes, the op-ed piece that we had
Right.
come out in the Mountain Times last year. I mean, the downtowns.
Correct.
We are living in a mountainous state where the vast majority of the development pattern is and has to be where there is a river, where there is a body of water, simply because that's where the flat land was that people could develop on.
And that's why I came up with this formula the way I did, because having worked with landlords, having seen the problems tenants have, be they mobile homes in mobile home parks, trailers in trailer parks, or apartments in any residential block, is why I put together community housing development experts, state treasurers, basically architects, builders, the advisory board that helped me craft this plan. We worked for over 3 years, going over every possible issue that could be raised to make sure it was bulletproof. And right now, I have not had any resistance from any member of either the development sector, landlords, financial institutions, religious institutions. What everyone is saying is, get me a pilot. Yeah. Show me that someone is interested and we're on board. And that's why we're here in Rutland. We think Rutland can be the pilot. We think Rutland can become the model for the state of Vermont. And we think Vermont can become the nation's model. As you said, the narrative, Rutland is the perfect city because the image it has globally is not the best, but it can become the best. It's got a great history, of great founding models, be they John Deere, be they, cookies, be they, why not
and additionally,
housing?
I think it's important that a place on the map, that its people control the narrative of who they are, what they are, and this is one of a thousand different ways that we can take that narrative back instead of occasionally having national media come here to talk about what they want to talk about.
Correct.
Which we have, like all of the mill towns, this city has taken its lumps through deindustrialization and what have you, but that isn't the sum parts of what the people here are and how they are defined as a group of people. And I like the idea of cities and towns like this all over the country, taking back that narrative. It's something that personally is important to me as a relatively new citizen of Rutland. You've had success as an entrepreneur. You've had success as a banker, as an attorney. Why this and why now? Why of all things is this what you're doing? Is this legacy for you? Or why are you a part of this? Why are you leading this charge?
Well, absolutely, it is all about legacy. I mean, as father and grandfather of 3 children and 3 grandchildren, it's important to make sure that they and their peers are able to live comfortably, have a roof over their head. When I see a crisis as someone who's been politically active, as you well know, I was very active in political campaigns. I was instrumental in working on the campaign of Jimmy Carter for president. I then was a founding member of the Democrats for Reagan committee. So I've worked on political campaigns nationally, locally, in California and Los Angeles, and even in Prescott, Arizona, my current home state. And to me, as someone who has benefited from capitalist America, if you will, I see no reason why a country that has revolutionized capitalism and democracy can't be the leading revolutionary on housing. And I want to be part of that legacy. Right. And New England is where America's founding fathers started the American Revolution. Vermont, as the outlier rebel state, has always basically challenged the system. So what better place to challenge the current housing models than Rutland, Vermont?
I'm your host, Scott Graves. With me, the founder of Breaking Housing Matters, for our inaugural episode here at the show, Mr. Peter DeCrassel.
And thank you for having me, Scott. And I want to urge all viewers to tune in to future interviews that Scott's going to have with other supporters of our housing initiative, people that are gradually coming on board. It has been a process. Like I said, it's been 3 years in the making, but we finally have some traction starting here in Rutland, and we do plan on rolling it out into other cities across the state, and as I said, making Vermont the model. So thank you, Scott, for joining us and for leading the charge here in Rutland and Vermont.
It is absolutely my pleasure. Folks, we want to remind you one last time that housing matters, and Breaking Housing Matters is here to innovate. Have a great night.